This is New Zealand, and here's where people actually live. Surprisingly, nearly 80% of the country's land area is completely uninhabited by humans. At first, this seems odd because New Zealand is larger than you might think and has a very good climate for living. New Zealand's South Island and North Island are the 12th and 14th largest islands in the world, respectively. If placed over the United States, they would stretch across the east coast from Florida up through Pennsylvania. Together, these two islands are even larger than the United Kingdom. Like the UK, New Zealand shares an almost identical climate with similar temperatures and rainfall throughout the year. The Köppen climate classification designates the climate type for the UK, Ireland, and most of New Zealand as oceanic and temperate, with no dry season, warm summers, and mild winters. If you look at a worldwide map of where this climate type and similar climates can be found, they include several of the most densely populated places in the world, such as most of Western Europe, Vancouver, Mexico City, Lima, Johannesburg, and the settled parts of southeastern Australia. One of the largest outliers here is New Zealand, which, despite having a climate nearly identical to the UK and being larger in size, is vastly less populated. The UK has a population nearing 69 million, while New Zealand has just over 5 million people, nearly 14 times fewer. In fact, New Zealand's combined landmass has a lower population than many smaller islands around the world, despite its larger size and more ideal climate. To put it in perspective, the population density in the UK averages 281 people per square kilometer, while in New Zealand, it's only 18 people per square kilometer. The UK is therefore 15 times as densely populated as New Zealand. So, why is New Zealand so comparatively empty despite its size and climate? The answers are complex and fascinating. The population pattern in New Zealand gets even stranger the more you look at it. Remember, around 80% of the country is uninhabited. The majority of New Zealand's population, more than three-quarters, lives clustered on the North Island, while less than a quarter live spread out across the larger South Island. The smaller North Island has a lot more people, but even then, almost half of the North Islanders live around Auckland, the primary city. Strategically located with good natural harbors and fertile soils, Auckland alone is home to about 37% of all New Zealanders, nearing a population of 2 million. This high concentration of people around one city makes New Zealand one of the most highly centralized countries in the developed world. Including Auckland, the North Island is home to 4 out of 5 of New Zealand's largest cities. The largest city in the South Island is Christchurch, placed upon the flat Canterbury Plains. However, excluding Christchurch, the population density across the rest of the South Island is very low, averaging about 5.4 people per square kilometer, similar to the sparsely populated states of North and South Dakota in the United States. Historically, the South Island had more people than the North Island during the 19th and early 20th centuries. The biggest factor explaining New Zealand's relative emptiness is its sheer isolation. Some cartographers divide the planet into the land hemisphere and the water hemisphere, and New Zealand is almost directly in the center of the water hemisphere. The closest large landmass is Australia, nearly 2,000 kilometers away across the Tasman Sea. Besides Australia, New Zealand is surrounded by scattered islands, Antarctica, or open ocean for thousands of kilometers. Even today, air and maritime traffic around the South Pacific is sparse. It takes a nearly 4-hour flight from Auckland to Sydney, comparable to a flight from London to Athens across Europe. For most of Europe, New Zealand is the furthest place away without leaving the planet itself. This extreme isolation meant New Zealand was the final large habitable landmass discovered by humans. It remained an untouched ecosystem until Polynesian explorers likely stumbled upon it in the 13th century. The Maori developed a unique culture and remained undisturbed until the mid-17th century when a Dutch sailor discovered the islands. Lasting European contact began in 1769 when Captain Cook visited. Other islands like Great Britain, Java, and Honshu have had far more time to develop their populations. These islands have been settled for tens of thousands of years, existing nearer to major continental landmasses, and were discovered millennia before New Zealand. As recently as the 13th century, New Zealand's human population was 0, while medieval islands like Japan and Great Britain already numbered in the millions. Having more people to start with means having more people later on. The Maori population likely numbered around 200,000 when the British arrived, but this number crashed significantly due to European-introduced diseases, warfare, and other factors. By 1890, the Maori population was around 40,000, while about 500,000 European colonists had arrived. Initially, most European settlers set up on the South Island due to fewer Maori inhabitants and the discovery of gold. It wasn't until the 20th century that the North Island recovered its larger share of the population. Today, over 3/4 of New Zealanders live on the North Island, as the South Island is more mountainous and difficult to build on. The South Island lies along the intersection of the Pacific and Australian tectonic plates, resulting in the formation of the Southern Alps, which are comparable to the original Alps in Europe. These mountains make the South Island's terrain challenging for large-scale settlement.